Hello, it's 22 hours GMT in Accra and 23 hours in Abuja, Nigeria. From the News Hub here at Adisawe, Kanda in Accra, this is news at 10. I am Stephen NT. Let's first start with the major news highlights of the day. The Agric Minister will justify 16 million cedis budget before Cabinet on Thursday to fight the invasion of fall army worms in some parts of the country. The task force will supervise mass spraying of some 1,300 affected lands this weekend. President Akufo-Addo has meanwhile directed the constitution of an emergency national task force to provide technical assistance to address the army worm invasion in the affected regions. And the Supreme Court has directed counsel involved in the case seeking abrogation of the agreement between Government of Ghana and the United States for hosting 2 former Guantanamo Bay detainees in the country to make further submissions. Before a decision is taken, the Apex Court said it has not been able to reach a decision in respect of some of the reliefs sought by the plaintiffs. The New Patriotic Party has inaugurated a 10-member 2016 Election Review Committee to assess its performance in the last elections and map out a strategy for the 2020 elections. The party's acting General Secretary, John Boedu, says the committee will also review the party's relationship with government officials. Those are our major news highlights. Remember, we're streaming live on our Facebook page, and you can hear us on 3FM 92.7 as well as on our affiliates across the country. You can hear us also on the TuneIn app on your mobile phone. Up next, we have more news for you. Up next is the big one. Welcome to the big one. Now, the Agric Minister will justify a 16 million cedis budget before Cabinet on Thursday to fight the invasion of army worms in parts of the country.
State of emergency has been declared.
We have prepared a budget of 16 million Ghana cedis, half of which is to go into the purchase of the chemicals required to spray for the control and annihilation of the outbreak of the worm. We want to remove this permanently.
The Minister of Food and Agriculture says it takes the issue seriously.
Yesterday, I called for the suppliers, the chemical suppliers who are holding stocks of the chemical required, and assured them that they should release the chemicals to us for the immediate distribution, subject to our payment. They have gladly agreed to that. And we are very grateful to the agrochemical suppliers who also see the urgency of this matter and are not waiting for settlement of their invoices before releasing. We are sure that by the weekend, the spraying will start in earnest.
Together with the farmers, the task force is also receiving support from the development partners to combat the infestation. But as the mass spraying begins, concerns have emerged about farmers who have already lost their produce.
The consequences of it in terms of compensation, we'll have to look at it. So we'll get to it. The immediate financial requirements are the budget that has been presented by the relevant directorate, as the PPRSD, so that the Ministry of Finance can release this money, 16 million to us, to be able to accomplish the assignment. But as I said, as a ministry, we are not waiting for that.
Right, I have in the studio tonight Dr. Winfred Ni Okai Hammond is a retired senior entomologist for the United Nations FAO. Now he's consulting on fall army worms in Africa. Doc, nice to have you here. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
So the FAO, what is your readings into the fall army worms situation in Ghana?
I would say that the fall army worm came to Africa to surprise many African countries, including Ghana.
What's the element of surprise? I mean, what makes it
because it's not a
surprising?
pest that is usually found in Africa.
Where is it usually found?
The word fall suggests to you that it's more in the
Europe and
especially the Americas.
Americas, okay.
That is where it usually occurs. And especially last year, suddenly we have reports of the armyworm, this fall armyworm that is spreading across the continent at an alarming rate. We just had a meeting in East Africa. It's a continental-wide meeting to develop strategies to quickly combat this pest. The situation is such that it's an emergency, because for some countries, if we don't take the necessary actions now, we're not likely to have.
I like the way you're saying it's an emergency. So if we don't see it as an emergency, we will be crushed, and all the food planting, food job, and all of that will go to nothing.
Exactly. Let me give you an example. In Zambia, 2-3 months ago, they had to replant 90,000 hectares of corn, of maize. They lost it to the fall armyworm and had to replant it.
That's incredible.
And you could imagine if you don't have a contingency plan in place to replace more seeds and help the farmers to regain their crop. That is the kind of situation that I think Ghana is trying to prevent. Because here we are talking about just about 1,300. It could be more, because we need to do proper assessment. But whatever it is, government has taken the necessary steps
to deal with it,
in place a technical team
as quick as possible,
with many expertise to deal with this as quickly as possible.
I know you mentioned Zambia, but other countries like Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe have all been affected. So overall, how serious do you think this fall army worms? What is the extent of threat to food security to Africa?
This is a pest that can travel 100 kilometers a day.
And how does it do that?
The moth, which is the adult, the worm, the caterpillar, is the one that does the damage. But the adult, the parent, is the one that is flying and taking advantage of wind directions, wind speeds. But on itself, it's a good traveler.
I see.
Can go long distances. And they have noted in the Americas that it could go as fast as 2,000 kilometers in a year. So once it gets into a place like Africa, then we should be ready to really combat it at any level, because it comes, and when it comes, it's really going.
So I'm curious, just as you expressed shock and surprise at the fall armyworm's invasion on the African continent, how did it get here?
There are many hypotheses as to how it left the Americas to come here. One of it is through trade, that quarantine services in one country or the other were not very tight to pick this up, and it escaped. The other is it could have just come, it was spotted in Sao Tome and Principe, and it could have come by wind direction, which is a bit remote. So it's more likely that it
was transported.
Yes, transported.
By some means.
Some means. Hiding in some ship, came with some imports of cereals.
Yeah.
It's a pest that affects corn, wheat, sorghum, millet, and not only cereals. It affects also cotton, vegetables. It's been found on cowpeas. It's been found on several other crops. It's known to affect 80 species of plants.
That's dangerous.
So even this exercise of spraying that is recommended as an immediate action to take is a firefighting exercise.
Doesn't necessarily eliminate the threat.
It reduces the threat when especially it's preceded by a proper assessment on the ground where you know where to go.
Okay,
and
so
how to
let's deal with the proper scientific approach to nip this in the bud once and for all. We're not just talking about reducing threat, eliminating threat, but we're talking about cutting it totally to zero so that it will not affect our crops. How do we go about that?
Cutting it to zero is not an option.
Wow.
It's not possible.
Wow.
You would only reduce the threats, and you can contain it, what we call containment.
Wow.
And using pesticides alone is not enough because it's also a pest that develops resistance
Wow.
to pesticides. And so you have to use different combinations of pesticides to beat its mechanism of developing the resistance against those pesticides. But you should also be aware that pesticides in itself for our environment is not the best.
I know you're Ghanaian. You know about our Ghanaian terrain. Do you think we have the systems and the support that is needed to ensure that we can reduce this to the barest minimum? Already some farmers have started applying some pesticides or insecticides on their farms already. How bad is this, or how good is this?
Well, the good, let's start from the good. The good is that a technical team has been put in place. They are looking at 4 different areas. And it includes properly preparing and building capacities of people on the ground to understand what the problem is and what they are trying to deal with. We also have the group that is looking at different options, what we call a management toolbox, out of which you have different approaches. In Brazil, where it is a major problem, they also have very good technologies available. They have what we call egg parasitoids. They release them, they feed on these pests. So one insect feeding on the other. That's a good biological control.
Are there side effects of these applications, chemical or biological?
Well, if it is a classical biological control where you go to where the pest is coming from and you bring in those natural enemies that has evolved together with the pests to control them, the side effects are reduced to the minimum. The problem with the pesticides, especially if it's not the one recommended by international safety standards, because the WHO and the FAO has standards that need to be met. And what the farmers you're referring to, most of them will quickly run to, may not fall under this category. And in that case, then, you are posing a big threat to their lives, the lives of livestock, and
consumers in the food chain.
And consumers in the food chain,
well.
exactly.
So, FAO, do you have any support systems for countries affected by this worm? What are they? Ghana? Do we have some support system for Ghana?
What FAO and the other partners have met with governments for the past, since Monday, we've had a series of meetings. Last week there were meetings. And what we're trying to do to see the strength of government and what are the gaps.
Right.
To fill in the gaps and help us fight against this menace.
Right, Dr. Hammond, we're grateful for your time. Dr. Winfred Ni Hammond is an Okai Hammond, I beg your pardon, is an entomologist. Thank you very much for making time to come to let us know that this is an emergency. We do hope that all the state institutions and systems that are put in place will work quickly and faster to curb this situation in the bad before it becomes serious. Let's move away from that now. The National Council of the New Patriotic Party is meeting to decide on the fate of Gender, Children and Social Protection Minister Otiko Efisa-Jaba and the party's Northern Regional Chairman Buhiri Nabu. The MPP Northern Regional Chairman Buhiri Nabu disrupted a meeting chaired by the Gender, Children and Social Protection Minister Otiko Efisa-Jaba with some women in the region. The two personalities have since dominated the media scene with accusations and counter-accusations. The National Council, which is the second highest decision-making body of the party, is expected to prescribe measures to resolve the feud between the two at a meeting this evening. The Gender and Social Protection Minister was reported to have had a meeting with President over the issue. And then the Northern Regional Chairman was also reported to have been summoned before the President on Wednesday when the National Council meet. Let's quickly get on to the telephone lines and speak with our reporter Jonathan Adams, who is following this. He's at the Alisa Hotel where the meeting is taking place. Jonathan, good evening. I know it's deep in the night, but what can you tell us?
Well, Stephen, we are still here at the Alisa Hotel here in Accra, where the National Council of the MPP, members of the Council of the MPP are still meeting here. I mean, the meeting actually started at exactly 7:30, and you have a number of dignitaries and the number of MPP national executives in the meeting. The President himself, Nana Akufo-Addo, is here. The former president, John Ejikun Kufuor, is here. The Speaker of Parliament, Professor Michael Quayle, also is here. John Boydu, General Secretary. You have also Otiko Jaba is here. You have Buhiri Naba is also here. And the number of issues actually they understand the meeting is discussing, including the feud between Otiko Jaba and that of the Buhiri Naba. And the meeting also is considering a number of issues concerning the National Delegate Congress that will be coming up very soon of the party. And they are discussing issues, how the arrangement should be like, and then some amendments, understand, to the party constitution. Of course, right. They are being locked in the meeting as I speak now, and understand the meeting is going to travel into late into the night. By 11:30 before, we should be able to see the meeting coming.
Right, Jonathan, we're grateful. I know this is going to drag, but we are going to keep our viewers and listeners on radio updated on the developments there. Thank you very much. We're grateful. Jonathan Adams is our reporter who is monitoring a crunch meeting of MPP leadership over a feud between Buhiri Nabu and the Northern Regional Chairman of the party and the Gender and Social Protection Minister Otiko Jaba. This is news at 10. I am Stephen Enti. We're live from the News Hub at Addis Ababa. You can also hear us on 3FM 92.7. We'll be back. Now, 49 victims of Tuesday's gas explosion at Takoradi are still on admission at 3 major health facilities there. 7 of the victims who sustained serious burns are said to be in critical condition and needed to be referred for better attention. These were disclosed when the Western Regional Minister for the region, Dr. Kwekwe Friye, visited the victims. Victims of the Tuesday explosion are still being treated at various health facilities in the Sekondi Takoradi metropolis. The first port of call for the government delegation was a Fiankwanta Regional Hospital. The acting medical director, Dr. Richard Anthony, told the visiting team a total of 88 persons were brought to the facility, including 3 others brought Wednesday morning. 15 of the victims are still on admission, but responding to treatment.
One incident happened far away, about 200 meters away from the site of the blast. There was also a pregnant woman who was on her way to hospital. By God's grace, she came to Efiankwanta and she was delivered. Both baby and mother are hale and hearty. So that is the situation at the moment. We expect that more people may be trickling in as the week runs out.
The head of health services at the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority Hospital, Dr. Titus Victor Anab Bisi, said of the 28 victims who were received at the facility, 8 have been discharged. The remaining 20 who were said to have suffered serious burns are responding to treatment.
There are various degrees of burns. Severe burns came out of about 11 of them had severe burns. The rest of them were mild to moderate. Yes, within the next few days, we cannot get them all to heal within these few days, but once they are stable, we'll discharge them, they will come back and we'll keep with the management.
The Takoradi Hospital attended to 40 victims, discharged 26, with 14 still on admission, according to the hospital authorities. The Western Regional Minister, Dr. Kwekwe Friye, regretted the explosion effect on both human and property.
But I tell you, the sort of devastation that I saw at the site, people should have died. So I'm very, very grateful to God that nobody died.
He said a 5-member committee will be formed to deliberate on how the cost of the treatment of the affected will be shared. The Speaker of Parliament, Professor Mike Okoye, has called for economic cooperation among African countries to foster growth and development. He was speaking during a courtesy call by Egypt's Foreign Minister, Sameh Shoukry.
Ghana-Egypt bilateral relations date back to the period of national liberation across the African continent in the 1950s. The visit to Ghana is part of Cairo's effort to strengthen ties with countries on the African continent. Speaker of Parliament Professor Mike Okoye, who received the delegation led by Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry, noted Africa is faced with several economic challenges, hence the need for countries to be more open to other economic opportunities.
This is the time when Africa is seeking closer cooperation in economic terms, so that there will be more specialization in terms of industry and in terms of economic development.
Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry acknowledged that the 6 years of political turbulence and transition in Egypt have brought to the fore the need to foster continuous ties with other African countries.
Egypt has in the past fulfilled its responsibilities towards African solidarity and looks forward in this era of its also transition to a new system of government and enhance the level of our development together.
According to the Foreign Minister, Egypt has about $1 billion investment in Ghana. These are in the areas of infrastructure, construction and power. Member of Parliament for Kaikwe Central Patrick Boama called for collaboration between the two countries to further improve the aviation and health sectors.
Eurojet is an Egyptian company that is building about 9 hospitals. It's encountered a lot of challenges. Most of the districts that these hospitals were to have been set up have not benefited from that project since 2008. With your knowledge in these areas, you'll be able to assist the company if they have any challenges.
And the Bono Ahafo and Volta regions are currently top of the HIV prevalence rate at antenatal clinics. In a latest HIV survey by the National AIDS Commission and the Ghana Health Service, the median HIV prevalence for 2016 was 2.4%. Let's quickly get on to the telephone lines now and speak with Dr. Asiedu, Programs Manager at the National AIDS Control Program. Dr. Asiedu, greetings to you. So what has been the trend over the years? HIV prevalence at the antenatal level, has it been declining before the latest survey?
Right, thank you very much, and good evening to our listeners and viewers. HIV in Ghana for the past 20 years has been on the decline. That is what we say, because since we started monitoring the trend since 1992, we've seen a reduction. Now, we've come through a number of cycles where we've had some significant peaks. But if you do a trend analysis or a linear trend analysis over a period, it's on the decline. However, in the past 2 years, we've started seeing a sudden increase. In 2014, in fact, 2 years before, it was 1.6, and then it went to 1.8, and this 2016 result shows an increase to 2.4. Now, for a period, we were below 2%, and for the past 2 years, increased. But if you do an overall, let's say, 10-year or 20-year trend analysis, it's on a decline. We've had about 3 major peaks, and this 2.4 is the lowest of the 3 peaks.
Interesting. So I know that Ghana had been, well, I don't want to make it sound like in the past, but Ghana's approaches of focusing on most at-risk population, sending the prevention message to where it's supposed to go has been commendable over the years, and which has resulted in the continuous decline. I also know that the withdrawal support system support in terms of funding from Global Fund and other international agencies like PEPFAR and the rest had an effect on these support systems. Would you say that perhaps the lack of financial support from donors is now beginning to bite us as a country?
Yeah, I'm sure to some extent I'll say that it's beginning to reflect. But the other reason here is that, in fact, if you notice, generally, as you said, even amongst the key population or most at risk, the recent studies that we undertook, for instance, in female sex workers, we noticed a reduction. We're still undertaking the study for men who have sex with men, and we also expect a reduction. If you take overall general prevalence, it's been stable. Right now, it is a fact that the resources are dwindling. But to a very large extent, the impact even will be felt even more as we move along. And there is a greater call on the part of government to actually complement this, because it looks like globally there is a determination by partners to reduce the funding as much as possible. And, you know, some of the things that we were doing as a package of care now have been cut very slim. A lot of the resources go into commodity now.
Right.
And so some of the things that we did in the past, like prevention, education, behavior change, communication among the general population and all that, it's reduced. Even in the routine care, you find a lot of these just being reduced. HIV testing just testing.
Right.
And effort doesn't go into all that behavior change communication. Now, despite the fact that we also know that when you put people on treatment, it overall will reduce the disease burden, the viral load. And
right,
the risk of transmission will be low. So, to some extent, we have to brace ourselves to be able to fill the gaps occasioned by a reduction in this funding from this major funding source.
Right, Dr. Asiedu, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much, Dr. Asiedu, is Programs Manager at the National AIDS Commission. And on that note, we draw the curtains for News at 10, which came to you live from the News Hub at Addis Ababa. Thanks to those of you who listened to us on 3FM 92.7. Thanks for leaving your dial there. I'm Stephen Enti, and on behalf of the crew, good night. There is more news at 3news.com.